Hi, for anybody who just joined the webinar to go over the Encore month-end processing, we're going to start at 3 o'clock. I'm just going to give a few minutes here for others to join up that have signed up. So again, we're going to start right at 3 o'clock. If you have any questions or anything during the presentation, you can always send a message to me through the chat option, and I will try and address them either as we go, or I might keep it till the end. We do have a segment there for questions and answers. During the presentation, the lines will be muted, so just keep that in mind as well. Thank you very much. Hi, for everybody who just joined the webinar, my name is Brian Alexander. I'm a Jonas Encore trainer. I'm going to be doing the webinar on month-end processing today. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes. We're going to start at 3 p.m. just to ensure that anybody that might be running last minute can sign on here and join us. Again, we'll be starting in about 3 minutes at 3 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is the Jonas Encore webinar on month-end processing in accounts receivable, obviously. My name is Brian Alexander. I'm a trainer with Jonas, specializing in the Encore software. Thank you for joining us. So first, a couple housekeeping measures. Just during the webinar, because there are numerous participants, obviously, the phones are going to be muted by me, and what that's going to allow us is to go through at an even flow. If you have any questions or anything, use the chat box option and just type it in. I'll see it here on my end. If I can, I'll stop and answer it when it's appropriate. If it's at the time, I'll try and address it then. If not, I might have to leave it to the end and then address it. If it's anything obviously very in-depth, then it might be more of a training issue versus just a simple question and answer. So right now I am going to go ahead and mute the lines so that there'll be no interruptions. Okay, now that that's done, I'm also recording this webinar so that we can put it onto our support site, which is quite a good resource for clubs. If they have certain questions or feel uneasy about a subject, you can go in there and watch them as many times as you'd like, and they are available and download in a PDF version and video. So there's multiple ways to keep up to date on it. So what can you expect during this webinar? So webinars are not necessarily specific, one-on-one training which is provided by an Encore trainer like myself. It's more of a refresher, a point of reference, kind of point out things that you may know a little bit of but may not know, Maybe you catch a step or two that you've missed in the past, something like that. They run approximately 50 minutes, give or take. We try and have 10 minutes for any questions and answers. Obviously, those can vary depending how many questions there are and how in-depth the topic is to cover. So moving along, month-end processing is probably one of the most stressful times for a club, obviously, especially going to a new system. So what does month-end processing entail? Well, there's multiple steps to it, and you'll notice, I'm sure you have in Encore, that each individual module is a step in the process. So we don't necessarily do it all as in one system. You have to go through piece by piece by piece. And the reason for that is that it gives you the ability to run each piece, verify the amounts, verify what's being done, then proceed to the next step. And it gives you the option to try and correct things before you have to close out and run statements and things like that. So in a nutshell, what is part of the month-end processing? Well, it's your point-of-sale end-of-day updates. Are they done? Are they finalized? Is there anything that you in particular have to do still with those? Cash receipts. Have you taken all your payments in? Have they been posted? Is there any outstanding ones still in a batch in your file there? Fee billings. Have they been run? Have they been posted? Recording charges, if applicable. This could be a one-off charge. It could be a charge to multiple people. Miscellaneous charges. This is generally going to be a specific charge to a large group. Minimum billings, if they're applicable, have you run those? The auto-apply credit balances, finance charges, statement messages, statement attachments, and that's for emails only, and then printing or emailing the actual statements. Have you finalized the statements? Have you closed out your old periods and opened new fiscal periods? And have you run the tax report? So in a nutshell, these are the steps in the month-end processing. It looks like a lot, obviously, but when you do it piece by piece by piece, it does have a flow to it. So let's start with the point-of-sale end-of-day update. The reason this is first is that this has a lot to do with the members' amounts, obviously, that are going on to their statements. So you have to verify that all the month's POS or point-of-sale activity is updated. So when you're in the point-of-sale tab or module and you go to the end-of-day update, check under the sales area tab. This lists all open shifts and chits. So when you're doing your end-of-day updates, what does this mean? It means if you have any chits open, you can't close a shift. If you can't close a shift, you can't post the end-of-day update. This is one that a lot of people do run into, and they catch it too late, or they spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's missing. This is usually one of the things. They might have an open ticket somewhere that, even though it's from 2 weeks ago, it's still open in the system. So you then have to go back, backdate your workstation, close off the ticket, run the end of day, finalize it, then you can proceed. So end of day updates typically should be run throughout the month. So some clubs do it daily and finalize them. Some clubs do it every few days and finalize it. Some clubs do it weekly. You just have to get into some kind of procedure or a normal procedure where you do it this many days or you do it every day. Who's going to do it? So some clubs have their controller do it. Some clubs have their food and beverage managers do it. Some clubs have their golf pro do it for themselves. That's going to be a personal choice for your club. What's the best process? But the main thing is to get into a habit or a process that's standard. It's repeatable all the time, so you have a routine. Now, what you're going to do here as part of the end of the month processing is mainly just to check that you haven't forgotten any or that you've run one for each day that you should have. So you'll notice that when you run a POS end of day update batch, it stays in there for quite a while. This is why, because you have to be able to go back and verify that you've run it, that there's nothing missing, and then all batches for the month should have a final status. So I'm sure, as you know, when you run one initially, it has a draft status. Draft status means that it's open still. You can go back into the point of sale, fix anything, and then finalize it. But once a batch is final, it's on the member statement. So those chips now go onto the member statement, and they would have to be corrected or changed through accounts receivable. So in order to actually proceed in the end of the month processing, you would have to make sure that all the batches have a final status. So it should be part of your process to actually go in and verify that, okay? Now, cash receipts. So cash receipts are mainly going to be used for recording payments, things like this. So you want to process those periodically throughout the month as well. Like I said, some clubs do it every day, some do it every few days, some do it every week. It's up to you what process works for you, but you just want to make sure that, again, it's repeatable and it can be a routine. And you want to verify that there are no open or unposted cash receipt batches. If there's an unposted or open batch in there, it will not show on the statements when you run them. Every piece of the process has to be posted in order for the statement to catch it, okay? So if payments are submitted by members after the month end and you want them to be included on the statement that you're processing, make sure that the batch date of record is in the statement month. So what does this mean? So let's use now as an example. It's May. So let's say in May, I'm processing May, and on June 1st, a member comes in and goes, oh, here, take this check for May, and you want it to reflect on the statement. Well, the date of record of the cash receipt batch has to be in May. If it's June 1st, it will not actually process it until you run the June batch. So the date of record is very important. That's the date stamp on the GL and on the statements, okay? So when you run it, the cash receipt, make sure that you put it into May if it's being recorded for that. Then when you run May statements, it'll record that on the May statement. As you can see here at the bottom here, there's an example. If you're entering member payments in December, but the payment should appear on the November statement, the date of record should be November 30th or earlier, exactly like the example I just did for you. Now, fee billings. So fee billings are the actual agreements. These are things like dues. So what do you have to do? You have to run at the end of the month. Now, you need to choose the month to bill as the month for which you are printing statements. If you're printing a November statement, for example, but running the process in December, change the month to bill back to November. Why? Because you have to track the month that you're actually recording those billings for. Now, because of things like the fee billing schedules and whatnot, say December's is a little different, it may not catch that. It may go, oh, I'm only processing December, and it has nothing to do with November. It's completely separate. That's why if you're running November's fee billings, you need to run it as of November in the fee billings module. You can run separate batches for different fee billings, or you can complete them all in one batch. I'm sure you know there is an option to sort them out as well. You can run specific ones, you can run a group of them combined, or you can run all of them at once. So it does offer you flexibility. So if you have a particular dues, say a certificate or something that you want to run as a separate one just to make sure it calculates correctly, you could do that and then run a separate batch for the rest of them. Now, you should do a final check and select all fee billings to ensure none remain to be billed. What does that mean? So do a test run, select all fee billings, and then go through in detail and make sure that each person's being billed what they should be. Yes, this is a big process for some clubs, obviously, with multiple fee billings and multiple members. So do spot checks and pull out 4 or 5 members that have various fee billings, make sure that they're all in there, and also take a look through your list and make sure that every one of those fee billings is flagged as being billed, okay? Because there is an option to unflag it, so be careful with that. And when you're done, there should be no unposted batches remaining. Again, it's like it's just like any other batch in Encore. You have to post it for it to go on the person's account. You have to post it to their AR account, okay? And then the statement grabs the AR balances after all this. So record charges. This is a very good tool that a lot of clubs make a lot of use of. So this is used if there's any one-off charges or adjustments are required to be made to a member's account for the statement period. The examples they use here are charge for a lost card, adjustment against account for dining, things like this. It can be used for a positive or a negative, so it's available both ways. Now, if you don't have any adjustments to be made, if you don't have any credits or anything that you want to put on there or any adjustments, then you can skip this step. I always advise to go in and at least look at it just to make sure. It's better to be in there and go back out and not have to do anything and take the extra 30 seconds than to realize later on, oh, I should have done that. Now, the reason I say that is when you go in there should be no unposted batches remaining. So you might, because remember, you can go in, start a batch, put in a bunch of entries, save it, and go back out. But it's still not posted. It's only saved there. So you have to make sure that that everything's been posted that needs to be. Now, miscellaneous charges is a little bit different. So miscellaneous charges are really any charges. It's to be used if there's any charges that are required to be made for the statement period on a batch basis. So this is more so like a locker fee where it might be going to most of your membership, but maybe not all of your membership. It's designed to be one specific charge to a multitude of people. So in this example, charges for an entire membership category or for charges for a batch or multiple members. So the example they give here is a charge for social member monthly dinner. That's a good example. Say it's $50 and it has to go to all the social members. Well, the miscellaneous charges will allow you to pick that billing item, put in the amount, and then put it to all those social members based off of the membership category. So things like locker fees I like to use an example of as well, because those might go to all your golf members but not your social dining members, for example. This way it'll allow you to say this is the amount, this is the billing item, and it's going to all these membership categories, and do it to a multitude of members without having to go through record charges and enter each one individually. If you don't have any miscellaneous charges that need to be processed, then this program can be skipped too. But again, I always advise at least go in and look, because you can't have unposted batches in there. What that'll do again is it will sit there, and it won't catch until you post it. You have to post it to the member's account so that the statement will gather that information. Now, minimums. So some clubs have minimums, some don't, but for those that do, this is where you run your minimum billings. So if you have a minimum billing set up, then this program needs to be run. If you don't have a minimum billing set up, you don't need to run it. Now, you can run one batch for all minimum types that exist, or you can run multiple batches, one for each type of minimum if you wanted to. So it is variable. But you have to ensure the period ending is set to the end of the current month being billed. So you have to, in this example, let's take May as an example. You want to ensure that the period ending is the end of May. You don't want it to be June, July, or August, because it will grab all those different minimum amounts and start putting those onto the statement. So you want to make sure that the period you're billing for, some clubs are monthly, some clubs are quarterly. You want to ensure that the minimum period is set to the end of the current month so that it calculates properly. It's going to pull that information from the minimum setups. Now, you'll recall in there, it's where you set up, okay, a year is from this month to this month, and the first billing period is this to this. The next minimum period is this to this, and you tell it how much it is for each of those periods. That's where it's gathering the information from to say, oh, okay, within this particular period, you have to spend X amount. They've only spent Y amount, the difference is this, and that is going to be billed onto their account. That's why it has to be set to the end of the current month, because it needs to calculate up to the current date. If you don't have minimums, obviously you can skip this. Now, as a note, this does not apply to pre-billed minimums. Pre-billed minimums are basically run like a fee billing. So you run it like a fee billing, they get a credit to use, and then it's used each time they, buy something applicable, usually food and beverage. So pre-billed minimums are set up a little different. They're basically set up like a fee billing and set up to issue a credit, quote unquote, when they're billed, and this will allow the members to go in and buy the hamburger and use that minimum that they've already paid. Auto-apply credit balances. So this is where we generally run into a lot of issues with what does it do? Why is this here? What is the point of it? Okay, so this is a very important step to be run because it impacts the application of finance charges. So you have auto-apply credit balances, and then you have finance charges. You want to make sure that you run this first before the finance charges. So the reason you want to do that, because if you run the finance charges first, it's going to run it on a wrong amount. It won't take this credit into account. Because remember, each step is basically independent of each other. So it has to be run prior to finance charges, but after your billings and charges have been completed, because you want it to be the most up-to-date fee billings. You want it to come off the proper billings. So what it's going to do is marry up outstanding credits with outstanding charges on member accounts. So what does that mean? So let's say Mr. Smith has overpaid by $500. At some point, he just put it on. It's right now outstanding on his account. You run his dues, and his dues are $1,000. Well, it's going to take that $500 and apply it towards that first. Generally speaking, the process is oldest to newest. So it will look for anything older first to the newest. There is a process being developed to try and marry it up to specific ones. It's not in there yet, but that's in the works. And what it's going to do is apply credits up to the end of the current month. So remember, date of record is important, due dates are important. This is where it comes in. Now, again, the takeaway from this, run it prior to finance charges, but after your billings have been run. Then we get into finance charges. So here's what finance charges is going to do. It applies late fees against overdue charges on member accounts. Pretty straightforward. But remember, the reason you ran the credits first is that you don't necessarily want to charge late fees on something that's really not late. Now, when you're running your finance charges, make sure you choose the period ending the current month. You do have the option to opt out of billing a selected member, just simply uncheck bill to exclude members from charging late fees. Now, when you review those charges, it's going to show a summary of what charges the late fee is being applied on. So it'll show, these dues are overdue. It's charging your 1.5% or whatever it is, and it amounts to this much. And you have the option to uncheck that. So if it's a certain situation, Mr. Smith is getting an extension a little bit, you do have the option to just say, don't bill him for late fees. Now you get into your statements, so statement messages. At each month end, remember to update your statement message. You can customize each month to display a different message, or you can set a default to appear each month unless otherwise specified. So you have to have this feature activated first by calling support. That is basically where you set up your default message, and it keeps going to that first unless you tell it otherwise. To set up default message, you go into AR settings, put in your message for default, you put in your message for members with credit balance, put in your messages for members who subscribe to pre-authorized payments. So this is where you can go into AR settings, and especially with credit balances, usually it's something like credit balance, please do not pay, or with members of pre-authorized payments, this amount will be taken on the 15th of the month or the 30th of the month, something like that. And the idea is that it will populate on your statement messages with those to say, at any given point. So you can see here as a screenshot under AR settings, there's statement messages. Default message, that's going to be the one that appears over and over and over. At the bottom is the payment messages, the credit statement message. Your account has a credit balance, no payment is due at this time. So what's going to happen is if the system recognizes that your statement balance is a negative, it's going to go and actually pull that message and put it on the statement. And then for the messages for members with pre-authorized payment, your credit card will be charged for the amount outstanding. That's going to be for anybody that has the pre-authorized payment set up on their member file. It will grab that statement message automatically. Again, so aside from defaults, you can create a new message when running statements. So you type the desired message in the text box. If it's grayed out, the feature is not yet activated, and you have to call support to set it up. So when you're running your statements, you'll see on step 1 there, you have your parameters, the send option, that's where it's print only, email only, print and email. You can sort it by the member number, you can do the communication type, and you can use the addresses as of. So you always want to use the most updated addresses, so you use it as of the date you're running the statements. The reason that you would do that is if Mr. Smith's statement is going to go to his house, but he just moved, you want to grab that new address. That doesn't affect anything to do with parameters for the statement itself. It's just grabbing addresses as of today. And then below that is a statement message option, and you can actually type it in there, and you'll notice there's a flag there at the bottom that says save this message as the default in AR settings. So if you type something in there and you want to save that, you just flag that there, and it'll actually populate that into AR settings automatically for you. Again, if this option, the statement message, is grayed out, the feature is not yet activated, and you have to call support to set it up. Now, statement attachments. This is specifically for emailed statements. You can attach multiple documents to the email. So where and how do you do this? So in AR setups, AR settings, the forms tab, which I'm going to show you a screenshot right here. So you can see here, we're in AR settings, forms, member statement attachments right here. So you have your file ready and you can browse to it and add it. And what's that going to do? It's going to send it with the statements, okay? So in order to email statements, you obviously have to have email settings configured to do that. Where do you do that? Well, that's in System Admin, Global Settings. It will only transmit to members with valid email addresses on file. So this is where it comes in. Do you want to choose to just print? Do you want to print and email, or do you want to just email statements? So you have multiple send options within the statement processing. And then on top of that, you can set up at each member account how they prefer to receive their statements. So if they want just printed, you can set it up to print only. If you want it to email only, you can set it up to just email. Now keep in mind, it's always going to want to default to print and email. It always wants to send as many copies as it can. So to do this, what do we have to run your statements? Well, you have to enter a description for the batch of statements, a month statement. Usually it would be something like May 2017 statement, something like that, that you can identify at a glance and know what it's referring to. So you choose all receivables to run the statement for all. And then you choose the month for the statements. And you want to, again, you want to ensure the correct month is chosen, as it will default to the current month, which may be subsequent to billing. What does this mean? Well, if you're billing for May, you want to bill May. If you're billing for June, you don't want to bill May. Then you choose your sorting. How do you want the statements to sort for you? And then choose your communication type, which would be statement. And what's that going to do? That's going to pull your members' preferences for how they receive their statements. Now, the next step is to select the members to run statements for. You usually do all of them in one batch. It's the most straightforward, the fastest, it's the easiest. You do have the option to do it for certain people, and yes, you do have the option to go back and print an email multiple times if need be. as long as you haven't finalized your batch. Now you can preview the member list for printing and emailing. Note that a window will pop up if there are end of days that have not been run. Again, this is where step 1 comes in, the POS end of days. If there are any that haven't been run, that pop-up is going to come up, and you've got to go back and run those for all chits to post to statements. Otherwise, you know, all those chits that Mr. Smith has in food and beverage are not going to show on his statement. So A connects to B, connects to C, and it always references back. So select checkboxes for members to print email statements to. You may only want to select a few and test print them ahead of time just to proofread them, just to make sure, usually 1 or 2. And then note that once the print and email statements button is clicked, selected members will get an email if they have an email address that's valid. So as soon as you hit print email statements, assume they're gone. There's no testing it, there's no stopping it. Assume they're gone. So what's next? So you select all members and click print and email statements to process. This is again assuming you're processing everybody at once. And there's a little screenshot of the print email statements button, which will be at the top of your batch screen. The last step allows reviewing and finalizing of printing and emailed statements. Note that you cannot run the last step until at least one statement has been printed or emailed. If nothing's gone out, you can't do any finalizing. Then when you click Finalize Statements button, when ready to final post the statements. Now what does this mean? General rule of thumb, allow some time for the statements to get out there and to get feedback. Because once you finalize the statements, anything you do to the account is going to show on the next statement batch. So think of it this way. There is a hard wall between statement A and statement B. When you hit finalize, anything you change from statement A will show on statement B. So good, like I said, a good rule of thumb is allow a little bit of time for some of the statements to get out there for members to start receiving them. If you start getting a lot of phone calls, maybe hold off. If you get 1 or 2, then maybe you're comfortable finalizing them. But keep in mind, as soon as you finalize them, anything you do after that is going on to the next statement. So as long as you're comfortable with that happening, go ahead and finalize. So member statement finalize. When is it safe to do this? We just discussed this a little bit. It should only be performed once all member statements for the period have been verified and no adjustments or corrections are required. Like I said, give them time to get them, look at them, and then do maybe a few adjustments that you have to or corrections, reprint them, then finalize, if you can. And then once you're done that, you can finalize them, they're ready to go. Now the next step, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that's it, that's all, we're good. There's a couple more steps to it. You have to end your fiscal period. So what is ending the fiscal period? It involves closing the previous fiscal period, opening the new fiscal period, and it helps to prevent posting in the incorrect period by closing the old one. So some users can have privileges to override these closed periods. That's where you'll get the error message if you try and post something and ask, do you want to temporarily open it? Do you want to open it for this transaction? Do you want to open it, period? That's where that comes into play. So where is this done? It's in System Admin, System Setups, under your company, in the Fiscal Periods tab, which I have a screenshot for you right here. So right now we're in System Admin, System Setups, highlighted the club's company, and you can see here we're using 2014 as an example. So is the highlight of that is period number 3, which is March 1st to March 31st. Sorry, it's Canadian dating. March 1st to March 31st, and there's an active period tab there. That's a drop-down menu. You can say, no, it's not going to be active. Yes, it is going to be active, or it's going to be restricted. Restricted is going to be, it's restricted to certain users, things like that. Because at the user level, you've already set up, can they open up periods temporarily? Can they post to close periods? If they can't do it, they won't be able to. even though the period, just by having that period closed, they can't do it. Okay? So that's ending the fiscal period. General rule of thumb, close off the previous period, open up the next period. Some clubs even go a step further. They would have just close January, leave February open, and then open up March, and then the next month they would close February, leave March open, open up April. And then tax reporting. So tax reporting is basically the last step of your month-end processing. So system admin reports company tax reports. It provides a report of taxes. So you select your charge reporting group, which is probably going to be taxes. Select your charge reporting category. You choose your specific categories to pull, and then ensure the period ending date is accurate. So if you're running up to May 31st, make sure it says May 31st, 2017. And then flag the close reporting period after running and saving required versions so the information does not show on future reports. Basically cuts it off and creates a new report the next time you run it so that you know in May we did this, in June we did this, in July we did this. Now reports. So what reports are available? So we have different, as we call them, canned reports that are available to generate at month end. So in the GL, there's the detailed general ledger showing account balances, as well as in the GL, there's the trial balance. Now, under the AR side specifically, this is where you have your aged receivables, you have your sales summary by day by selecting the month date range, and your payment report showing members' payments received. So this is where you can start reconciling money coming in versus what's being billed out. And we have what's called business intelligence. So the use of the business intelligence module to generate custom reports suited to the club's needs. This will be covered in a different webinar, but it basically lets you grab anything you can think of out of the system, okay? It is very cumbersome to sometimes use because it allows you to go in and grab information from anywhere in the system that you might need to. Now, a little bit more on reporting. So credits reports. When you have your credits there, so you select the transaction date range. You can do detailed or summary. Most of our reports are either detailed, which itemizes, or summary, which just gives you the summary results. Which credit categories are you going to report? And then shows a list of credit balances for each member. So credit categories might be golf shop credits, might be gift certificates, things like this. Those are different categories. And then what it does, it'll actually show you a list of the credit balances for each member that has that. Then we have what's called the club credit inquiry. That selects an individual credit number, and it details who the owner is, who the purchaser was, what date it was purchased, when does it expire. It shows any activity related to the credit, what's been used, what hasn't, and it shows the current balance. So if it's, you know, they have a credit for $1,000 in the golf shop that was purchased by Mr. Smith and Mr. Rogers owns it, and it was purchased on May 1st, and it expires on June 1st, and it's for $1,000, and he's used $500, there's a $500 balance remaining. This is another step in the month-end reporting that you might want to look at, so you can see, are members coming in and using their credits? Are they, you know, is it drawing them into the shop? Is it a way to better track, you know, what's actually enticing them to come in and spend some of their money? Okay, so that is the end of the presentation side. At this point, I'm going to unmute the lines and take a few questions. Just be 1 second. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I don't hear anybody. If somebody has a question that they're trying to speak, hit *1, and it might say you're muted or unmuted, and then hit it again. Okay.
Hi there.
Hi.
Are we able to, in any way, verify statements that have gone out? We've only been working with Encore for a couple of months, and I've gotten a decent amount of calls of, I haven't received my statement. We've tried to address everything outside of Jonas. I'm just wondering if there's any reporting available as to all the email addresses that it did send to.
And these are for emailed statements?
Correct.
Okay. Right now, there's not a report necessarily, but there is a queue that we can. It's the closest we have to a report right now. What I would do is it's in the system admin. Sorry, off the top of my head, the system admin.
I have seen that actually. Yep.
Tools view queue. If there's any issue with those going out, they will be in there. Okay. If it's something in Encore, they'll be in there. If you don't see it in there, it could be something beyond Encore. Okay.
Okay.
If you do see it in there for any reason, give our support a call. Might be something, just a technical issue with the Encore. Could even be a setup, and we can always look at that. If it's not in there and they're still not getting it, then it's likely something beyond Encore itself. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else got any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for your question there. That's a good one. They are working on a tool to actually verify that the emails have been received. Basically, like a read receipt option that you have on an email. They're working on something similar to that. I don't have a time frame for it, sorry, but I do know it's in process.
Could you steer me how to change the message on the statement email that goes out so that I can change the text, the body of the email?
Oh, the email that the member gets? Yeah.
Yes.
So what you're going to want to do is it's actually under system administration. Actually, you want to go back as far as go into AR and go into your AR settings, which will be under additional options, setups, AR settings. And there should be a statements tab on there.
Okay.
And the reason you want to go in there is you want to verify what email body form you're using, okay? There should be a name for it. Usually it's your club name or something like that, and then email statement letter. And then what you're going to do is under System Admin Forms, you're going to find the name of that particular form and select it, and then go into Advanced Form Designer, which will be on the bottom of the screen, and it's going to pull up what looks like almost like a PDF of a form, and in the middle it'll say something along the lines of, please find enclosed your monthly statement, some kind of text there. And if you double click on that, it'll bring up a text editor box where you can actually go and change what that says. You want to keep it as general as possible because you want to use it for multiple months, obviously. But you can change that in there, and that's what will, now when you close that out, make sure you save it, because if you don't, you'll lose any of that text that you entered. But that is the actual form that the system pulls and displays as the body of the email that the member gets.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? No? Hello? Okay. If there's no other questions or anything, at this time I'm going to end the webinar. Thank you for attending, and as always, if you need any support or any help with anything, our support lines are there. And we also have all these webinars on our website that you can go back and review them just to kind of go over things again. And thank you for attending. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks.